Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell. Introduction. Entry number 1183. Recorded by Father Gonzalez Rubio in the Santa Barbara Mission. Book of Burials reads: On October 19th, 1853, I gave ecclesiastical burial in the cemetery to the remains of Juana Maria, the Indian woman brought from the San Nicolas Islands, and since there was no one who could understand her language, she was baptized conditionally by Father Sanchez. Thus, she became known to history as Juana Maria. It had never been her name. Sometimes, too, she is called the Lone Woman of San Nicolas, but most often she is remembered now as Corona, the name that Scott Odell gave to her when he wrote her story. Sadly, she was never able to tell that story herself, for her language was one that no one could comprehend, so the details were pieced together, guessed at, fabricated, romanticized at times, embroidered in the retellings. What is known is this: for thousands of years, the Nicolino tribe had lived peacefully in a tiny 3 by 9 mile island about 70 miles off the coast of Southern California. In 1811, a Russian American trading company led by an American captain hired a group of Alaskan Aleutians and deposited them on the island of San Nicolas to hunt sea otters, whose pelts were highly prized. When the native Nicoleños objected, they were massacred. Some accounts say that the Alouettes then left the island. Others speculate that they were killed by the women whose husbands they had slaughtered. By 1835, there were very few of the original natives left on San Nicolas, and those who remained, it is generally agreed, were all but one female. The woman who was later to be baptized on her deathbed with the name Juana Maria would have been one of these. The Santa Barbara Mission sponsored a rescue operation and sent a schooner and its crew to collect the few remaining Nicoleños for their own safety. They grouped the small band of natives on the beach and then took them aboard the ship. But they left one woman behind. The versions of why this happened vary. The simplest: a storm was coming, they had to hurry, and one woman didn't make it to the beach in time. A little embellishment: the woman was with the group on the beach but ran off to find her missing child, and the crew, with the strong storm beginning, couldn't wait. The most romantic account: she was already on the ship when she realized her child was not among them, and she dived overboard and swam back. Whatever the circumstances, this was the moment when the unnamed woman became the Lone Woman of San Nicolas. She remained on the island alone for 18 years. If, indeed, she had a child, it did not survive. Records show that when she was found in 1853 by fur trapper George Nidever, she was dressed in a skirt made of green cormorant feathers. Cormorant feathers. Nidever described her as about 50. Other accounts say she was maybe in her 30s. All of them describe her as smiling. A Sacramento newspaper reported, "The wild woman who was found on the island of San Nicolas, about 70 miles from the coast west of Santa Barbara, is now at the latter place and is looked upon as a curiosity. It is stated she has some 18 to 20 years alone on the island. She existed on shellfish and the fat of the seal, and dressed in the skins and feathers of wild ducks, which she sewed together with sinews of the seal. She cannot speak any known language, is good-looking, and about middle-aged. She seems to be contented in her new home among the good people of Santa Barbara." And that is all we will ever know. In the short time remaining to her, she died 7 weeks later, succumbing to illness as her predecessors had. No linguist could identify her language or translate the words of the 2 songs she sang for them. I knew Scott Odell, not well, but certainly well enough to have asked him questions. Yet I failed to do so, And as has happened before, when I have lost people whose wisdom I valued, I am left with regret that I can only guess what the answers might have been. How did he decide on the age she would be in the book? Clearly, he realized that telling the truer story of a grown woman with a child would be less appealing to the young audience he intended. And so he began with, "My brother Ramo was a little boy only half my age, which was 12. A young girl, still a child herself, she laughs at her older sister, who paints her face with the emblem of a not yet married woman and calls her vain." The protagonist faces the challenges of growing up that all 12-year-olds do. What a heartbreak to have faced them all alone, without peers or parents, without guidance or counsel. And how would he compress the 18 years of her isolated life into a compact and coherent story? Mr. Odell masterfully lulls the reader into what I can only describe as island time. Without clocks or calendars, we have only the seasons and the sea to measure by. Many chapters begin with a sense of both time passing and the endlessness of its passage. The white man's ship did not return that spring or in the summer. Flowers were plentiful that spring because of the winter's heavy rains. Another summer had come, and still I had not speared the giant devilfish. Spring again was time of flowers and water on the ravines. After the fierce storms of winter came many days when the wind did not blow. Did he comprehend starting out the challenge it would be to tell a story that was only one human character? Most of us rely on dialogue and relationships to define the people in our books or portray their change and growth. Yet, after the death of the protagonist's brother, the reader must depend entirely on the interior voice of a solitary, uneducated girl. The author makes that voice so clear, so convincing, that we learn and mature as she does. I wondered what would happen to me if I went against the law of our tribe, which forbade the making of weapons by women. If I did not think of it at all and made those things which I must have to protect myself. And two, he has created characters and company out of wild creatures and the natural landscape itself. It is as if Karana speaks to the sea, confides in the cliffs, whispers to the wind, and to the yellow-eyed gray dog, the fearsome enemy that she tames to friendship. Because of this, I was not lonely. I did not know how lonely I had been until I had Rontu to talk to. This is a book that is really about the things most meaningful to young readers, what we are capable of, if called upon, the question of what home is and means, and what our relationship is to the natural world. More than anything, it was the blue dolphins that took me back home. My two young grandsons and I swam this summer with dolphins. They were not blue. They were a shimmery gray-white, and the sense of their massive power and their restraint was overwhelming. It is so easy to believe in their benevolence once they have nudged against you and invited your affection with their smooth, glistening smiles. Rereading Island of the Blue Dolphins, I could believe in their blueness, too, in the foaming patterns that they wove in the sea as they guided the boat through bright water. The blue dolphin left me shortly before dusk. They left as quickly as they had come, going on into the west, but for a long time I could see the last of the sun shining on them. After night fell, I could still see them in my thoughts. Me too. Thank you, Scott Odell. Lois Lowry, Cambridge, Massachusetts.